Okay. Mr. Comstock. Oh, please give your name and address for the record, please. That really helps.
I think I just heard you do it. But anyway, Dave Comstock. You heard a few things, excerpts from Jerry Brady's book, You Bet California Gold Fever. They should have taken everything out of here. They should have picked up everything in here, because the rest of the story is in here too. Jerry Brady is my friend, my close friend. We've both written about this. I trust him implicitly in his history. He says absolutely zero about anything happening after the early 1950s until he acquires the property. I'm going to argue, first of all, I'm probably the only person in this room that was a close friend of Lyle White's. Lyle White was not a miner. Lyle White, like myself, was a historian. He spent a lot of time out there, a lot of years out there, determining who lived there, where they lived, and what have you. He would chuckle today to hear himself described as a miner. There's a Lyle White Memorial Drive out there leading to the cemetery. I named it. I named it for him. Great man. The very first thing that I would say, since I'm going to be limited in what I can say, is well, let's go to Samara. Where Samara gives a definition of vested rights. And the very first sentence, a vested right is the right to conduct a legal, non-conforming use of real property if that right existed lawfully before a zoning and other land use restriction became effective. My argument is none of the mining out there existed lawfully after 1884. And Jerry admits as much in his book when he talks about the 1930s, when Frank Chase was operating out there, hired Jerry's dad, Tom Brady, and his uncle to run operations out there, and they warned him. They warned him, if you're going to do this, you only do it in the wintertime. Don't do it in the summertime because the dirt in the water is going to give you away. Frank ignored the advice, went ahead, they went on through the summer, and bam, who stopped them? Not the county, not the state, not the federal government, PG&E. Why? Because the debris that they had dumped into the river had gone all the way down to Auburn and ruined a Pelton wheel. And PG&E sued them for $125,000. And immediately, Fred Cassidy at Alpha Hardware came along with a $15,000 suit for what they owed him. And Frank Chase quit and left. And by default, then Alpha inherited I didn't grow up in this county. But I came up here in the early 60s, 1964. And a friend of mine up here, Leo Davidson, was a retired miner, and he was a sniper. He was running around doing prospecting all over this area. I met him over on Rattlesnake Road, where I was living first. And he took me out to U-Bet area and Red Dog area early on to watch his operations. I watched him operate down in Missouri Canyon. Interesting little operation, a one-man operation on a creek, similar to some of the photos you saw. I had another friend working down towards Steep Hollow. I became familiar with these kind of operations. Typical about them, they worked in creeks. You do it in a creek bed, a stream bed. Interesting thing about this property, this so-called Blue Lead property, used to be the Red Dog Mine, no creeks. Zero creeks. No creeks. All the water that came in there had to be piped in. It had to be brought in flumes and pipes and what have you. There is no water there. Now, that's not to say that this outfit that's there right now hasn't damaged some creeks, but they weren't their creeks. Okay. I then met Lyle White, and Lyle White asked me to go out there and do some exploratory work, looking around for where the old flumes were, to look around where the water, where the ditches were. I bought property out there. My wife and I bought property out there in 1968. We bought part of the Brady Ranch up on Chalk Bluff. My wife and I have now lived on Brady property longer than the Bradys, certainly longer than Jerry. And one of the things I used to do, starting in 1968, and these are dates that we brought up here, where mining was going on 68, 70, whatever. For a period of like 10 years, I spent a lot of my time hiking over all these areas, exploring it. I am intimately acquainted with this piece of property. I never saw one piece of equipment in all those years. I never saw one evidence that anybody had moved anything. I never met anybody. I never heard anybody. It was a wonderful experience for a guy from the city because it is the quietest place that I had been. All I could hear were birds and bugs, airplanes occasionally, but really quiet, really quiet. I've lived out there all those years since then. There's nothing secret out there. You hear everything. You hear trucks for miles away. And there nobody was shooting, no dynamite was going off, whatever. I'm saying that all of the evidence, so-called evidence of people doing things out there is nonsense, is not supported by anything. And I say, I was there. I know. I looked for it. I am not an opponent of mining. If you know that I'm a publisher of books, and I've written books about mining. I've published books about mining, about the Idaho Mining Company. I'm neither pro or con, but what I'm in favor of is people doing things right. I'm about obeying the law. Now, Jerry Brady has said different things at different times, and I'm not going to quarrel with what he said about his intents or whatever, but I know this. All the Bradys are really honorable, wonderful people. And if they were going to open up the mine, the first thing they'd do would get a permit. They would go and get a permit. The same way when they logged the diggings, they got a permit. They got a timber harvest plan. They did the thing right. And that's the way they would do it now. And we don't need people coming around wanting to take advantage of clauses that they can manipulate in order to avoid doing things right. I say, go ahead. If you're going to get a mining permit, do it right, and then we'll applaud you.
Mr. Comstock, so what do you hear now out there on the property?
What do I hear? I don't hear much, but I've been giving information. The reason you're all here today is because the last 2 years I've been feeding information into the planning department about strange goings-on down that road. There are a lot of times on our way back from town when the road is blocked and we have to follow enormous trucks hauling in, mammoth-sized mining equipment going in there. And I call the planning department and they don't know anything about it at that time, a couple of years ago. And so from time to time, I've given information. Other neighbors have too. You can't do things secretly out there. It's not possible. It's not possible to do things secretly. If these folks think that that nobody's noticing, it's not the case. And whatever the outcome of this, they're going to be watched.
Thank you, Mr. Comstock.